Hello, and thank you for joining us with the Anarchist Experience. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm your host, and today I have a guest with us, Patrick Janis. Did I pronounce that right, Patrick?
Yeah, you pronounced it correctly.
Okay, and Patrick is the host or the writer of a new blog called The Soviet. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not doesn't really have much on there yet, so
All right. And if you want to check out The Soviet, visit thesoviet2.blogspot.com, and you'll be able to check it out. All right, so I wanted to, I don't know, discuss or debate this particular point that seems to come up a lot of times. I think in my mind when I debate and discuss things with anarcho-communists, um, the idea that somebody should own the fruits of their labor. And I come from the position that yes, everybody should own the fruits of their labor, and that includes things like property, land that they've converted from a state of nothingness or just wildness into um, a farm, a homestead, a house, things of that nature. Um, with some significant, you know, changing of its nature, not just being able to go, I claim dibs over this area. I've actually put work into it and changed it into something of a unique nature. Um, and typically, I guess the response I get from most ANCOMs is that's generally fine. But then there comes a point where that's not exactly true. And I don't understand exactly why it is that if I've got something that I've converted into, let's say, a personal home for 10 people, 12 people, I'm actually, living in the house. I've made this into my home. That if I were to knock down a few walls within my home and put in some sewing machines, and then offers somebody else the opportunity to use those sewing machines as long as they made an exchange with me of some percentage of their work for me and some percentage of the work for them, that would somehow be me taking advantage of them instead of giving them an opportunity. Um, and you would obviously disagree, is that right?
well, yeah, I would disagree. Well, I'm not really an ANCOM. I probably should have made that kind of
Yeah, I
clear.
suppose I should not assume that it is something that does happen from time to time when when we pull people from that particular group. Yeah. So just I guess if you would like to give me an idea as to where it is that you're coming from, and then go ahead and then respond to my
Well,
question.
well, I come from the position specifically from the school of Marxism, sort of Marxist thought in general. I've been recently sort of looking through that, and I've been reading up on that
Okay.
specifically.
So that would be called, according to some people, would be called state socialism. Is that correct, or state
Well,
communism?
well, not really state communism. Like the state would eventually be eliminated over time. Like communism is a stateless, classless society. You would have sort of a transitional period called the dictatorship of the proletariat,
Uh
which
huh.
is which is essentially the rule of the proletariat. It's not like a dictatorship in the tradition in like the modern sense of the word, but rather the rule of the proletariat as a class over society. And that would be a transitional period going into communism. And that I think that would last for like 3 or 4 generations.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how long it would last. Like depending on how much of the capitalist superstructure remains intact. I mean, there's probably going to be cultural leftovers and that sort of thing.
Okay. And as far as the question that I posed, or the concept that I posed, um, the starting point, I guess, would be if somebody goes out into a state of the wild, and converts the nature that's out there into something like a home or a farm, for example. Would you say that that is a legitimate claim of ownership, that they are now the people who make the final decision regarding the use of this particular stuff?
Well, coming from my personal perspective, I don't. It depends on the utility of that. If we were to allow that sort of thing, what would it have an effect on? What would its effect be on the society as a whole? I mean, you have to take into account its effect on the material conditions of the society as a whole, rather than simply as an ideal within itself.
Okay, that makes at least some. I can understand that that might have some consistency to it. Um, so let's say, for example, if the person was going in there and creating a hog farm, and the hog farm produced a large amount of uric acid smell that was wafting across the plains. Whatever the results are, I don't know if it's uric acid. I think it is, but anyway, there's odors that are coming from the hog farm, traveling downwind into the homes and neighborhoods of people that are living in the area. And obviously, in that case, you would say, hey, this is just not acceptable. Assuming that this was something that was not acceptable to the people in those homes. Most people don't really like the idea of having pig slop smell coming through their home, but
Yeah.
assuming that everybody that was having to smell this stuff was going, hey, what the hell? Don't like this. Why did you have to put that there? You would say there's a problem, right?
Of course, you have to consider the community overall rather than the needs of the individual.
Right, and if the case were that the person were to, I don't know, create a situation where people could come and produce products that were more effective, and um, created something that was more, I don't know, either effective, faster technology, a more efficient technology, a more um, enjoyable experience, whatever it is that these products that they're producing are. If they go over there and they're producing these things as a result of this person's efforts, and this causes people who are in the community to have their products no longer desired because they're inferior. This harms those people in that case, so you would be against that as well. Is it correct?
Uh, well, yeah, all industries would be owned collectively, though. That's the
See.
thing. It would be owned by the entire community basically, either through the hands of the state or through cooperative businesses.
Like scissors, then.
Yeah. Well, scissors as in like a scissor factory or just like scissor.
Well, scissors, the means of producing haircuts.
Well, that's not really what we're going for here. I
Okay,
mean,
so mass production then, only.
like just mass production as we're not talking about individual objects, we're talking about land as property and the means of production, fac- factories and that sort of thing.
Okay, so as far as the land as property thing, I guess the claim would be that, well, there's only a certain amount of surface area on the planet that we can work with. So we kind of all have a stake in what's going on with this space amount, the certain amount of land, because human beings require the certain amount of land to live on and to produce the food that they live in or that they enjoy. um, so just to hypothetically, let's assume that we lived in a kind of like a flat world type of place where there was an infinite amount of land that could be obtained by people, that could be used for the means of production, and the idea that one place might be more distant than another. Let's say we also happen to have transporters like Star Trek tech. Um, does that make the system that you're describing no longer necessary because now everyone has access to the land to be able to produce?
Well, it could, but you're talking about a hypothetical
Oh
situation.
yeah, oh yeah. It's definitely not the real world example. I'm just trying to ascertain what it is that makes the rationale.
The rationale of it is we have a limited amount of resources that need to be equitably as equitably they need to be redistributed in a way that as many people as possible get enough of them to live off of. The whole point is to increase the amount of utility of the property and land for the entire whole of our human community.
All right. Um, Now that obviously has to be redone every I don't know, is it like 3 seconds? Because there's a new person born like every 3 seconds on the planet, right?
Well, you would have to you would have to do like estimations as to how many people would be born. Also, there would be increased amount of birth control within the society, like condoms would be hopefully relatively available to people, like condoms and birth control would be available and that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. And in order to have the society that your perspective is suggesting, you would want to have a specific level of technology achieved, or are you just open to it regardless of the technology level? Because there are a lot of people who might say that they come from your perspective, but are more of like the RBE, the resource-based economy, the Zeitgeist movement, the Venus Project, that kind of thing. Are you kind of heading towards that goal, or are you just, regardless of what the technology level is?
Well, the difference between the Zeitgeist movement and Marxism as a whole is, which is the difference is we have more of a plan and we understand society better than they do in a way. They take most of their criticism and critiques of capitalism from us specifically. Like they'll talk about how well not actually yeah, they take most of their critiques of capitalism from Marxism specifically and older utopian socialists.
Yeah, I certainly have played the irritant or the troublemaker in those types of discussions with people from the RBE and Zeitgeist and Venus Project type of thing, and I explained to them that it's essentially communism with
Yeah,
robots.
it's
Uh, and
communism. It's basically communism with robots, and they have no particular plan to transition into communism. That's
yeah, there is a variety. There are a variety of plans that are out there. I don't know if you've checked them out, but there's more than one you know explanation as to how we would go from being in our existing society into into that society. But yeah, it is interesting that I've taken quotes from the various different communist literature that's out there, specifically the Principles of Communism. That was one of my primary sources. Taking quotes from that, copied them, removed any, replaced any language that was of time-sensitive nature. Like if they said, I don't know, plowshares, and replace it with more modern terminology like stocks or something like that, depending on whatever it happens to be. And so then I put forth to the people from the Zeitgeist movement and Venus Project, which of these come from, Venus Project sources or from the communist sources, and um, every time they get 3 wrong out of the 5, except for sometimes they get 4 wrong out of the 5. They say that this is communism. It's hilarious that they're actually the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is kind of sad, really. Honestly, I'd rather not be considered close to them, but we kind of have somewhat of the same end goals. It's just I don't really feel that they have any particular way of getting there. Like even even then they're mostly pacifists. Like if you talk to them, they're really against violent revolutions or anything like that. So it's just almost impossible to make the transition from capitalism to communism in that way without some kind of violence or activity within the political system.
Well, all right. The activity within the political system thing. Um, yeah, they do try to support that kind of thing. Um, it's limited, but all right. That kind of I don't know. Let me ask. As far as the anarcho-capitalist position, do you believe that that does require also violence to be used to quote unquote overthrow the state,
Well,
and why?
well, I don't really see how anarcho-capitalism would translate into a different society overall. I
You don't understand how it'd be a different society?
I don't understand how it.
Are you me there? Could you repeat that?
I'm sorry, my mic is getting thing wrong.
Yeah, it looks like it's occasionally muting you. So I think that you might have one of your like cords stuck near one of the buttons that's pushing the mute function on the
I think
Hangout.
I got it. I think I got it.
All right, good. All right, so if you would please, go ahead and repeat what it is that you were saying.
Yeah, I don't really.
Oh, you're muting again.
Uh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going. Oh, wait. I had a dragon on, like, that speech program that.
Oh yeah, you got to turn that thing off because it'll take over the microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry about
Give
that.
you a moment. I'm going to go ahead and add an additional person to the Hangout just so that we can, make sure that we've got enough content to discuss. So just give me a moment here.
Okay.
All right, how's it looking?
It's looking good. I turned off dragon, so it should be fine now.
Awesome. All right, so you think that basically anarcho-capitalism is not significantly different than what we have now. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not that way. I'm thinking it would have a hard time translating into something really different. It might. Now I'm thinking it would end up as some kind of feudalism, from what I can tell, because a number of you would have problems with private security corps, which we have discussed in the past. And so far, I haven't really been able to find any anarcho-capitalist that has adequately explained why private security corpses wouldn't be a problem. And also you would have issues with gangs. Like gangs would become more powerful as pseudo-governments.
All right. Well, let's have me take a quick stab at that one and see if I can explain, why it is that wouldn't happen. Number one, the state, the government itself is a legitimized organization by the masses. It's perceived to be normal, acceptable, and approved the initiation of violence. If we were to look at what people think when it comes,
Hold on, I have to do something.
okay, see if I can get Jacob Salt in here. Pop on over.
Sorry, man, I gotta do something. I didn't expect this.
All right, you had something come up. Well, then let's just go ahead and pop this thing open to the community here. We will just go ahead and do.
I'll probably be back or something. I'm really sorry, man.
That's all right. Sorry about this, guys. Okay, so if anybody is watching in the Google, in the YouTube live event and would like to join me on the show, please feel free. I've got Jacob Solt. Is that correct, Jacob? Hello, Jacob. Your mic's muted.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right. So, Jacob, you're joining in. I don't know if you've caught anything that we were discussing there, but unfortunately, Patrick had to go.
Oh, okay.
So, I guess we can start over with a new topic if you'd like. But just as a general, introduction, if you would, just kind of tell people, where we can find your information if you make a blog, if you do a podcast, and what your general position is as far as a philosophy, if there is a particular response to this question as well. Does somebody own the fruits of their labor? So your general position now, and also where we can find you as well.
Oh yeah, sure. You can find me on Google Plus, Jacob Zolt. I have a community, Actionable Liberty. Let's see, my general orientation, probably in relation to this little hangout here, would be I'm an anarchist without adjectives. I find every flavor of anarchism to be delicious. And in terms of do we own the product of our labor? Yeah. Well, I don't know about the own per se, but I generally like the general statement is as it's colloquially used. Sure, we'll go with it.
All right. Well, I guess I should just define the word "own" for people who have have a difficulty with the term, because it has a lot of bloat associated with it. It has a lot of meaning that's built into it in our common discussions with people. Yeah. So when I say own, I'm referring to the person who has the final authority regarding the use of something. All right. So if I say that I own myself, I'm not saying that I can sell myself.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I have the final decision-making authority over myself. Now, theoretically, I could sell myself. All I would have to do is say, all right, when I die, my body goes to XY person, and they have the right to decide what happens with my body. But then I also have to die in order to have it happen, because it's physically impossible for someone to exercise final decision-making authority over my body while I'm in it.
Yeah, are you familiar with Walter Block?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. He says that if you don't own something, if you can't sell something, then you don't own it.
Well, I mean, technically, I can own, I can sell my body, but my consciousness, it's not possible for me to theoretically own it because I can't sell it.
I'm going to take him to my mom's.
I'm sorry, something just came up here. I'm going to take care of something. I just wanted to pop in and say hello and see what's going on here. I apologize for interrupting your thing. I have some things I want to address over here.
All right. Well, I'll certainly move on. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, then, looks like we've kind of run into a few snags. Little unexpected things there. All right, so we may end up doing a little bit of a short show today. All right, so the question then, I guess, comes, what is it that I'm prescribing? That, where is it that I'm coming from? And the perspective is that you own the fruits of your labor, assuming that you're using something that has not had any sort of negotiation with someone else who already owned it. And this would be, again, the final decision-making authority over whatever the thing was. So if, for example, you were to go out into a state of nature and work the land, plant some green beans, plant some tomatoes or whatever, and you were to take those things and put them into some sort of containers that you've made as well, or that you have legitimately purchased from someone else. Let's say you put them into jars and pickle them. Pickled beans are quite good, by the way. Then this stuff is now yours, and you can do what you will with it. And if you were to create a storefront on your property and offer someone the opportunity to come onto your property and to sell those jars of pickled green beans or canned tomatoes or something like that, then you can make an arrangement with them as to how you would like to distribute the proceeds. And if you offer them the option of selling them, let's say for $5, and you get 4 of those dollars and they get 1 of those dollars, and they say, yes, this sounds like a good deal because what they're doing in their life is producing less than $1, then they're perfectly welcome to do so, and you're welcome to do so, and this is an agreement that is legitimate. Because the produce of their labor, which is to sell the product, is to, if they own that, then it's to let them be able to contract to sell it ahead of time, even before it's actually produced, if they would like to make an agreement. So I do have an open invitation out in a group that we have discussions with, and had somebody pop in, but looks like he popped out again. Wonder what happened to Mr. Jones. Okay. So then the theory of the anarcho-communist position is one that says, no, once you've gone to the point where you've got something that you're no longer going to be present at, and it's going to be producing stuff, and there are going to be workers that are there making the stuff happen, that you no longer have a say because you've kind of released it back into the world of nature and available for people to use. I just don't buy it. It to me is kind of like I put in, let's say, 40,000 hours in order to produce all the things that were necessary in order to create this factory. And whether that was me producing wheat or corn or something on my own land with my own farm, and then selling it and then taking the proceeds of that and then using it to buy the land and the building and the machines. These are all legitimate trades that are acceptable, assuming that they haven't been coerced and haven't been, strong-armed into making these trades. So yeah, this is now a legitimate ownership, and if you offer somebody the opportunity to come on in and make some money, if they choose that it's a better option than themselves working the land and creating a farm of their own, then so be it. Now, there was also the question as to how is it that an anarcho-communist society does not turn into a state of feudalism, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But I had apparently Anarcho-Capitalism, I think that's a pseudonym, has joined us today, and so if you would like to be a participant and let us know what it is that where we could find you, what blogs or
It's actually just Jake.
Just what?
This is Jake, actually.
Oh, hello, Jake.
Hi. Yeah, that is Swedish for slaughter capitalism. So.
Oh, okay. And so, Jake, as far as how people would be able to find you, is there where would you recommend that they go to any particular URL?
Oh, I'm running Black Revolutionary. The guy usually comes here.
Yep. All right, Red and Black Revolutionary. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Jake Thompson has been on our show twice already. So I had Patrick on here, and he apparently is a Marxist.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he said that he doesn't believe that you can come up with an anarcho-capitalist system where you don't end up having a society that is essentially feudalism. And I would think that you might share his criticism of anarcho-capitalism in that particular regard. Is that correct?
I mean, that would be, I guess that would be a criticism of all capitalism on my part. I think that any form of capitalism, whether it be anarcho-capitalism or whatever you want to, whatever kind of capitalism you want to tout, I think that it's ultimately going to end up in feudalism.
Okay, all right. So one of the things that I bring up, or was trying to bring up in that particular discussion was the idea of legitimacy, that if you live in a society where people understand that government should exist and is good to exist and it is the norm, then that type of system has it requires significantly less effort and significantly less overhead in order to maintain. For example, if people didn't believe that the Pharaoh was God on earth, or that he was the son of God, that he would have had a significantly harder time trying to rein in the people that are around him as slaves. But he certainly may have been able to do so, given that the disparity of power that existed at the time. Now, then we had some advancements in technology that made these types of things, certainly more difficult to maintain. The idea that you could maintain a domination control over a population as large as we have, and that has access to the ability to produce weapons of mass destruction, makes it significantly less likely in my mind. I don't see how you could, have a control over a very large population that essentially says, well, you don't have a right to rule us. There is no legitimacy behind what you're saying. If they're willing to fight back, especially since they have the ability to cause a significant amount of damage, it seems entirely impossible to maintain domination over that type of a society.
Okay. I mean, there's merit to that in the fact that, if people, let's say tomorrow, decided to take down the ruling class or whatever, they definitely could do it. I mean, we outnumber them, I don't know how much to one, and so there's we could definitely do it with the combined effort that we could pull together. We could definitely make their rule over us non-existent. That's why most domination, and that's why the main way that people are kept in line right now is through psychological warfare.
I agree.
Have you ever looked into the public relations industry?
You know what? Actually, my degree is in advertising, and the public relations was it was running parallel. We were taking all the same courses, so yeah, I am quite familiar with the public relations is something I'm very familiar with. Yes, absolutely.
Right, and so, as I'm sure you probably know, public relations is simply a nice word for the propaganda industry. And what?
Yeah, I suppose, but you know what? Realistically, all communication in itself is potentially propaganda.
Yeah, it is. I'm not slamming propaganda. I'm just saying it's what it is. I mean,
it's kind of a tainted word, though. I mean, it's a method of communication.
It's not called that. It's not called that because that tends to have a bad connotation in people's minds, and they're using that as a tool. I mean, the public relations industry is ultimately a tool, the major tool of that psychological warfare, and so they can't really perpetuate that if they're calling their organization propaganda.
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult one to label yourself with.
That's going to leave a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. So they call it public relations because it sounds more.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is kind of that doublespeak kind of thing going on there.
Yeah, and so that's like that. Doing brainwashing through that. Front groups producing lines that advertisers and mainstream academic sources can pound out in order to brainwash people is kind of the way that most domination is done in today's society. Most of it isn't done by force. The large majority of it is done by indoctrinating people into certain social paradigms. So into accepting things like capitalism, into accepting things like the state, into accepting the current social order that exists. And that's kind of how most rule is done today. So you don't really need to have the kind of physical advantage, which the ruling class today don't even have. As I said, I mean, we with the different kind of let's say we all decided to stop doing what they wanted us to do. That would be they would act with violence a lot. Like, it would be a very violent process, but eventually they would have to give up. I mean, we make up their system. There's no possible way that they could force us into it. The only reason that it stands right now is because of the psychological warfare and the domination of the mind that is going on, using things like the public relation industry, using things like front groups, those types of things. And so, I honestly don't see how, if that continues, we could not have a population that accepted feudalism. Now, I don't even think it's going to be likely that we get to that point. I think capitalism is either going to wipe out humanity, run out of resources, or perpetuate revolution against itself, before that even happens. But
Okay,
I think if it was allowed to go on unrestrained without any of that happening, it would definitely get to a point of such inequality where you could have a system that was pretty much identical to feudalism.
Mhm. Okay, so I guess the thing that I'm going to there's a couple of points that you brought up there that I'd like to address, and but I do want to give the other people who have joined a chance to comment if they wanted to. Bob, did you want to say anything?
I mainly came in here to observe and see if there are any points I can address, but so far I don't see any.
Okay. All right, and Soviet, Patrick?
Yeah, I just came back. I'm sorry, I didn't hear much of the conversation to respond to.
So then let's go through a few things. All right. First of all, the idea that the propaganda industry will then end up taking control and so on. First off, we have come from a society that had developed at some point in time a propaganda system that suggested that this guy is, the pharaoh, he should have the right to rule, that this guy, he's God on earth and things like that. Then we have a consent of the governed type of bullshit thing that comes up with a piece of paper that, the Magna Carta or the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, of the people, by the people, for the people, that kind of bullshit, which creates this legitimization of these people having the right to tell everybody else what to do and to initiate violence against them, that legitimize these things. Now, these different concepts that have occurred, they occurred in a fairly primordial period of time in human history, where human beings were really, it was kind of we run around and kill stuff and survive for a week, and then we run around and kill stuff and survive for a week, and maybe we can do some agriculture, and we're starting to figure that stuff out. And so then when it started to come to the agriculture thing, we had nomadic, we had barbarian groups that would come over and steal our stuff, and violence happening on that front. So we had a fairly violent background where we had to deal with these difficulties of society, where we didn't have a lot of philosophy going on. People weren't given the chance to actually have intellectual debate and discussion. So we didn't exactly have a thriving marketplace of ideas going on. Even into the more productive periods of time, like the Industrial Revolution, we're still coming from this assumptive following of the things, the traditions of the past, where we are still stuck in that paradigm where we have to have people in charge telling us what to do, because if we don't, we're all just going to have chaos and barbarians, people breaking windows and taking stuff. This fear that occurs. So when it comes to having an actual marketplace of ideas, that's just it's just not happening. But in the case of, let's say, an anarcho-capitalist society or an anarcho-communist society, you believe that that in the anarcho-capitalist one that there would not be a marketplace for ideas because of some reason. I don't know what it is.
Uh,
And then you also believe that in an anarcho-communist society, though, there would be the marketplace for ideas, the opportunity for people to communicate without having an overbearing propaganda campaign taking control.
I wouldn't say that there wouldn't be a marketplace of ideas in anarcho-capitalism. There definitely is a marketplace of ideas today. I mean, if you look around, just look around the general, scope of debate, you see people arguing over this and that. So it's not that there's not a marketplace of ideas. It's that the ruling elite have such an advantage over society that they're allowed to skew the marketplace of ideas in their favor, creating, because of their economic advantage, because of their power over society, they can, create these institutions like the public school system, like, the kind of the propaganda industry I was talking about. And so they can create these institutions because of their power over society, and then use those institutions to skew the marketplace of ideas in their favor, to where there's not a lot of questioning of their power going on. There's not a lot of questioning of the system going on. I mean, if you look at the mainstream debate today, you have, these like
Republican versus Democrat.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's two
And
heads of the same.
it's not even that. It's like we have these so-called intellectuals, right? These kind of, economists and these kind of, political analysts, and they're supposed to be, and they are in a lot of cases these, really big intellectuals, and they, and their job is to, analyze the system and then spit back an analysis. And what they're saying, I mean, the marketplace of ideas is so skewed that their research is being completely fucked with. They're basically having, their research written out for them, doctored, and then sent out to them to be spewed out to the public. It's not objective research at all. If you look at mainstream academia, all of it is completely, it's completely untrustable. It's all doctored within to, meet the interests of the ruling class.
Yes, but Patrick, go ahead. What was it that you wanted to say on this?
I wouldn't say it would be directly altered and doctored like that. Like, that sounds almost conspiratorial. I would say there would be more of a culture of capitalism surrounding it. Like, it would be a part of the superstructure.
Well, that's really the large majority of it, yeah. But part of how that's perpetuated is the fact that research, is skewed in such a way where they don't have, the means to, where the public doesn't have the means to criticize the system. They are being fed, specific, quote unquote facts that are made up for the most part. And a lot of the time they don't directly lie to you. They just omit information and,
Exactly.
Information. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound conspiratorial, but that's really what's going on. Scientific research, in the case of politics and, basically any area that would serve ruling class interests, is being completely fucked with and messed with to serve their interests.
It's not necessarily conspiratorial in that there's no overarching I don't know, Bilderberger group that's going out there and saying, all right, well, you guys are going to go sell this message. You guys over there are going to sell this message. And you guys are going to, if you're not familiar with the Ender's Game story of where Andrew Wiggin and I forget his sister, they create opposing thoughts, but they're actually on the same side, and begin to dominate the conversation. That was a planned type of thing. What's going on in this type of thing, in my understanding, is that there is a norm that's expected, and people's perspectives are built upon these norms, and they're expressing things, as they see them, but their vision is tainted. You will see that if you look into examples of people who have had their homes broken into by perpetrators who are attempting to do them harm, to steal their property, things of that nature. If the homeowner defends themselves with a gun, it's hardly ever mentioned in the news that the homeowner actually defended themselves with a gun, or that a neighbor came over and defended them with a gun, because we have this general perspective that comes from the news media, which tends to be in very urban locations where they don't have a lot of familiarity with guns, and so their perspective is very, tainted in that that direction. So when they're trying to talk about these subjects, they're missing these things because of their vision is tainted.
Well, I wouldn't really use that as an example because you have you have media outlets like The Blaze and that sort of thing that would cover that would hype that sort of thing up.
I
Like,
mean,
you have
the gun control debate, not to interrupt, but the gun control debate, that's a very two-sided thing. What happens is, instead of making violence about about the social system, which it really is about, they make it a debate about guns. And so you have one side of the spectrum that is pro-gun, that says, oh, if people have guns, there will be less violence, blah, blah, blah. And that's, that is a side that they perpetuate, to abstract from the actual reality that is the fact that violence in any society is going to be dependent on the social system. It's not going to have anything to do with the gun laws that you have. That's a complete abstraction. But so there is the side that says guns are good.
Yeah.
It's a pretty small percentage of the media that's out there. It's a very, very weak voice in comparison. But I would say it's getting bigger.
I don't think it's particularly small though. I mean, if you look at like the debate, there's basically, it's set up so that there's news outlets for gun control and there's news outlets for being against gun control, and they're kind of, actually, I'd say in a lot of ways, from what I've seen, the gun control, people are in the minority.
Really?
The NRA lobbies heavily. Like you have like Fox News and the NRA and that sort of thing who lobby heavily and talk up guns and how great gun ownership is. You have organizations like that.
Yeah, but they also start from a perspective that there should be registration, that there should be government oversight, that there should be...
A lot of them don't, actually. A lot of them, there's been a lot of talk in the media about, it's a debate in the media whether we should have background checks.
Well,
that's still a debate.
That's in fact something...
As far as I understand the NRA's position
I don't think background checks would do a shit amount of good. I'm not in favor. I'm saying that it's a debate that's happening.
Yeah. Well, they certainly don't. But as far as the position specifically of the NRA is one that does approve government oversight and limitations and regulations and so on.
Oh yeah, but they're trying to reduce those limitations. It's like a matter of moderation, though.
But the discussion is tainted in the perspective that we still have to use this tool called government in order to handle handle these things.
Yeah,
instead of being about personal liberty and personal right of self-defense and defense of others, for example.
It's a narrative of moderation, that there has to be you have to be moderate. It's not like people fear radicals. Like the Tea Party wasn't really that radical if you look at a lot of the things that they were saying. Yet the media portrayed them as extremely radical and as something to be feared.
Yeah, and they certainly weren't proposing anything particularly that radical. They were just saying, well, we should have less government taking control of our lives. We should have less government doing it.
Saying that.
They
were coming from a Republican's perspective, right? The Republicans aren't like a paradigm of small government, even though they like to taunt that. I mean, what they're advocating, they advocate, the illegalization of many practices that they don't like, such as the use of most drugs except alcohol and cigarettes. I don't know if cigarettes can be considered a drug, but I think it can.
They're an addictive substance used for an artificial high, so I think they would count as drugs.
Yeah. So, so they they support that. A lot of them support the legalization of gambling. They support state involvement in getting rid of prostitution. They're pretty big government. And
Oh, I don't know. I spent a fair amount of time in the Tea Party. In fact, I made the logo for the state of New Mexico Tea Party.
And also, let's not forget the fact that they're cheering on U.S. imperialism all across the world.
There is some of that, definitely. There definitely is imperialism, pro-imperialism thing. But as far as my experience was, very, very, very small percentage of the Tea Party people were going into the anti, civil liberties of being able to have sexual relations with who you see fit, regardless of any
financial. That's a huge thing, though. Like that's a huge narrative in within their ideology and within just like them in general. Like,
I think that's been played on to them.
For example, like prostitution in a lot of ways goes against their value system. And so, they dislike it. They think it should be illegal. I mean, I don't like prostitution either, but I think state involvement would make it worse. But anyway,
I would say that you're probably buying in a bit on that one. It's at least when I was in it, which was years ago. Back when it was getting started, it was really not an issue. The issue was that I don't want you to be involved with my healthcare decision.
I'm talking about I'm not even talking about when it started. I'm talking about kind of the what it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it certainly evolved and it's changed into certainly more of the idea of modern republicanism that is just we're not going to sacrifice for we're not going to sacrifice our principles and they're going to stand up on their principles. So looks like I'm getting some background noise from you, Kai. I'm going to go ahead and mute you up there. All right. So I guess then the question that I wanted to go back to is the idea that if we have this marketplace of ideas, which I'm assuming that everybody is okay with, a marketplace of ideas where we have an idea that's brought forth by different people, they're able to discuss it and being able to persuade each other through whatever sort of tools of language that are provided, whatever sort of visuals that they would like to create of their own. We can certainly communicate with each other. We're all okay with the idea that people being able to communicate ideas and persuade other people is an acceptable and a good thing.
Well, on some level I agree with you, on some level I do not. Like there are certain ideas that shouldn't be expressed and probably should ultimately be censored. I know that's a position that most people are uncomfortable with taking, but you have to think about the effect of having that sort of thing. You have to think of the utility of the ideals that are being expressed.
I see.
Well, if you do that, then you must decide. Then you must ultimately have somebody to decide what is okay to censor and what is not. What is okay to think and say, and what is not okay to think and say.
Yeah, just so you know, Bob, Patrick's a Marxist, so.
I know.
Yeah. So, all right. So, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think you're kind of framing that in a weird way. I mean, Marxists aren't advocates of a lot of people like to paint them as advocates of total tyranny or something, but they're not. That's just not.
Oh, I'm not saying.
Oh, sorry.
There's a dialectical analysis to my understanding.
Yeah, it's a dialectical analysis of capitalism. It's also evolved more into a way of getting rid of. It's a part of getting rid of it. It's sort of a natural process of the destruction of capitalism.
I mean,
into socialism, into communism.
I mean, I've read a lot of Marxist stuff, and even I was reading one of Vladimir Lenin's books, and given his background, he was actually complaining about the level of government control over society. So it's not like Marxists are advocates of a totalitarian state. Marxism, he was saying, is an analysis. It's a scientific claim. It's not the advocacy of of a giant government or whatever.
Right, I understand. I got you. I'm not intending to straw man the position. So, when it comes to the idea that that there should be some people who are in charge of determining whether or not something is a legitimate expression or an acceptable idea to compete in the marketplace of ideas, suggests to me that that there is somehow either a divine superiority granted to these particular people who make these decisions, or that they are somehow imbued with a right that none of us have. So how is it that someone gains the authority to become the decider over what is okay and what's not?
Well, you see, there would be this more censorship of certain ideas is more a part of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is it's more of like you censor some ideas, like for example, let's say the whole idea that somehow that capitalism is a part of human nature, like that idea would probably get censored eventually because it would ultimately be harmful for society as a whole.
Well, then,
But you
well,
have
that
somebody
point
who
you have to
makes those
decide what is
decisions as
harmful and what's
to.
not. You go back to
Sorry?
the same point.
What was that, Bob?
I was saying then it just brings that back to the same question. You have to decide what is harmful and what is not.
Yeah.
Right, and who makes those decisions, and how did they get the authority to make those decisions?
Well, it would be officials that are appointed by the party. It would be officials within the party deciding.
Okay,
There would
and the
be a
party is.
the Communist Party, which would be supported by the working class and the people in general.
Okay. All right,
What
so
about
we
people who do not
basically
support the party?
have a group that is elected.
Yeah, they would be pretty much elected. They would have this general support of the working class.
All right, so we have people who are popular can make decisions that tell other people who are not popular what they can't talk about.
Well, it's a part of the process of transitioning from one ideological. It's a part of changing the superstructure. Yes, it's basically a part of that.
Yeah,
But
I understand the goal, but the actual methodology is the popular people tell people who are unpopular what they can't talk about.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of the process. I know it sounds really awful we're used to the bourgeois ideal that everyone should be able to say whatever they want, and it's not really true. It doesn't really help our society as a whole, and it's not even true within the frame of liberal democracies. There's been censorship of ideals in the past in liberal democracies such as America and the
Oh
rest.
yes, definitely.
no one's debating you on that one. We all agree. I think we can all agree on that one.
Yeah. But to say that that is correct is an appeal to tradition.
Yeah, and if you have like a
I'm not saying it's morally correct. I'm saying it's a part of it's a part of establishing sort of a government, transitional government. I'm
So
not
you're
saying
saying that since we already have the tools in place,
it's
that's something that we have to use in order to achieve the goals that you set forth.
yeah, it's an well, I wouldn't describe it as an evolutionary process, more of a revolutionary process towards the end of communism.
but what
We're
if
dealing with necessary evils, essentially.
Okay, and Bob, you had to say something?
well if you I was going to say was if you don't have that sort of free market ideal like that or ideal market, then what if your way of doing things is wrong and you simply stopping someone from simply saying, oh well, that's dangerous thought, and censoring them from saying that?
Well, you see, you would have internal discussion within the party. Like, there would be a general ideology, like a sort of left-wing ideology, which ideas would be put in. and sort of limited by, but you would still have internal discussion and a certain amount of freedom to discuss ideas within that society. There's limitations for each society that we have to live in. Unfortunately, it's just a part of the way. It's a part of building societies as a whole. You build a general culture of ideas and move on from there.
Okay.
Well, I agree with you on the way that there should be an internal debate, but my question was, what if some person says, well, that's a dangerous idea, even though it's not? What is stopping them from simply censoring you because you have a quote-unquote dangerous way of thinking when maybe your way of thinking is the right way?
First, it would be discussed within the party. What I'm talking about is democratic centralism, which is an idea which Lenin proposed and was generally enacted within the Bolshevik Party for the longest time up. Maybe I would say Stalin. It became more of a tighter bureaucracy. Basically, you have to remember that this is sort of a temporary deal. This is a part of the transition from capitalism into socialism and finally into communism. You have to remember these are temporary evils.
Okay, and if somebody were to say to you, well, then wasn't that already tried in the Soviet Union or elsewhere like China, and we've seen the result of that is a bunch of dead people.
Well, as far as the Soviet Union, that more fell because of reformism.
Okay, so the killing of all the people that Stalin did,
Can
was
I interject? Would that be okay?
Sure.
I don't like. I mean, I'm not even somebody who is a Marxist. I'm not. I have my own problems with Marxist analysis, obviously, and I don't like a lot of the ideas. But the thing is, you can't say, "Oh, look at the Soviet Union. Oh, look at China. Your ideas must be shit, right? Because that was shit." It's a terrible. It completely throws out the main.
The question isn't that's not my assertion. My question is, when somebody says that, the response that you would have is, what they did was a perversion of this because of X, Y, and Z.
Well, I have to. The main problem with the Russian Revolution was that it was supposed to be a spark for a number of other revolutions within industrial Europe. It was supposed to be supposed to spread across the world, basically, spread spread to the industrialized Europe, at least that, and it didn't. So you have this sort of problem of trying to build socialism in one country, which is almost completely impossible because of the capitalist world system and the weight pressure upon the Soviet Union that the Soviet Union experienced from other capitalist nations.
What were those pressures?
Well, the pressures like having other countries intervene during the Russian Civil War, basically to stomp out the Bolsheviks, and also you have a number of other factors that go into it, like the centralization of capitalism, which happened under the Soviet Union, could not possibly have eliminated the falling rate of profits, which is under capitalism. It actually dooms capitalism to its demise. Dooms capitalism.
Okay, so I'm trying to analyze where it is that the break is. All right, so let's just say that for the sake of argument that we've got the Soviet Union and they're doing their thing, and foreign nations, they're doing their thing, and if they don't cross the border and come on over into your nation and start doing subversion and trying to create revolutionaries that are going to try to overthrow the system that you're trying to put into place, then is there another factor that is also interfering with the process?
Yeah, there are other factors. Like, for example, the whole point of the Bolshevik Revolution was to create worldwide social. It was supposed to be a worldwide dictatorship of the proletariat. At least spread it across the industrial world.
Right. Okay.
Like,
But that's is your claim then that communism is not viable unless it is across all industrialized societies?
yes, it has to be worldwide. It has to be completely spread across the world. Again, that's the whole point of it.
All right.
Whole
So
point
if,
is,
if we had a society of the world, we've got a communist society across the planet, and we run into another species, another alien species that's come along, and it turns out that they're capitalist. As soon as we start interacting with them, some mechanisms are going to happen where their society is going to essentially destroy the communist market, the communist system.
I don't think it's even that. I mean, communism has to be a worldwide thing by definition. That's the thing. You can't have communism, and that's why I don't really like the point where excuse me, where ANCAP say, oh well, you can have communism and capitalism. I mean, no, you can't. Communism is supposed to be a worldwide system. It involves the common ownership of the means of production and the distribution of resources according to need. That can't happen unless communism is spread throughout the world. Otherwise, you simply have the private ownership of means of production, and people aren't free to satisfy their needs, to the fullest extent. So there isn't communism. By definition, communism has to be a worldwide system.
yeah.
All right. Why?
Because that's the definition of the word.
It's just, okay. It's like this. You can't have really competition within a communist society. Communism is not really about competition. It's about cooperation and sort of this not humanistic, sort of this bond between us all.
Solidarity type of thing.
Solidarity between us, and about eliminating class and the things that divide us arbitrarily.
Okay, so again, in the hypothetical example of we run across this alien race that comes along and they want to trade with us, and it turns out that they're a capitalist society. If we had a worldwide society that was already communist, but then this alien species comes along and wants to trade with us, at the moment that happens, the communist system completely fails. Is that the the result, or what? How does that interplay work?
Well, on some level, I don't even know how likely that situation is.
It's not likely at all. It's just it's a thought experiment so that we can analyze exactly what it is that causes the break.
I mean, the thing is though, it's not about individual cases of trade. Communism is a mode of production and distribution. You can't have a mode of production and distribution without a worldwide system. So, for example, what communism advocates is the common ownership of the means of production. That means that all of society must have an equal ownership claim over production. You can't have that if you only have, let's say, a worker co-op in an ANCAP society.
Oh, I'm not asking about that. I'm creating this.
I know. I'm giving the context to why we say communism needs to be worldwide. It has nothing to do with individual cases of trade. It's about a broad mode of production and distribution.
So then your answer to the question
of production and distribution that is not worldwide.
Okay, so your response is a little different than his, I guess. Then if we had a worldwide understanding of communism and everybody's on board with communism, 100% of the population is.
Well,
right. And then we have this alien species come along, and they've got their ships with cargo. Let's say that they've got unobtainium, okay, and they would like to offer some unobtainium to us for whatever it happens to be that we have. Let's say it's salt. For some reason, salt is difficult to find out there. All right. We, as the common owners of all the salt in the world, have the ability to offer them salt in exchange for unobtainium. At this point, does the system break, or do we just say, all right, well, we can go ahead and make these, exchanges,
and
move forward?
That's a false premise, number one. You're operating on the premise that everything in a communist society is going to be commonly owned. This isn't true. There's only specific things that are supposed to be commonly owned.
Well, the
Okay.
means of producing salt.
The means of creating salt. Okay. Well, like, is the salt that we are making an input into the economy?
Yeah, I don't know. We've got these machines that take seawater and they.
Okay, because like this is the thing that I always run into in discussions is when ANCAPs they take X thing and they say, okay, the common ownership of X thing. I mean, that's a false premise because the only thing that's like there's a certain thing that we advocate the common ownership of. So
Well,
you
like
can't just
resources,
take
don't you?
thing. Not necessarily. There's
you don't believe in
specific
the common
like
ownership of oil?
what's advocated is the common owner. I mean, like people can have their own specific views, but the necessary common ownership within communism is the common ownership of production, the means of production. That is to say, the non-labor inputs into the economy. That's what is advocated that is commonly owned. It's not just anything and anything you want to fucking imagine.
Well, I said this earlier in the show. You weren't here, but so that would include scissors, like for cutting hair.
If they were used in an input, if they were an input into the economy, yes, absolutely.
Used as
I'd like
input
to
into the economy.
Do you know the difference between private property and personal property?
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
That's a discussion that we don't even have to get into. I'm just simply saying that you can't take X thing and then like say commonly owned and then it's a socialist scheme of property. That's not how it works.
Yeah, okay, I got the difference there, but the question was posed to me: do I know the difference between private property and personal property? And yeah, I've heard the definition, and I've been every time that I've seen the definition, I've been able to come up with counterexamples that break the rule. So, if I can own, let's say, I have the means of production. It's called an oven, and I can produce cookies, and these cookies can be distributed amongst people, and people offer goods or services in exchange for these cookies. Well, this is entering into the economy. It's very minor, but it certainly does happen. And then if I invite other people to be able to use my oven in my home, then that's perfectly fine. But as soon as I am not at the home on a regular basis, then I'm taking advantage of the wage labor thing.
No. What I've been seeing with ANCAPs lately is they think that we have a principle of abandonment. And they're like, okay, well, if you, like the ANCOMs think if you leave it for a certain amount, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's about what that specific thing is and who owns and uses it. That's it. That is who owns and is directly affected by it. Okay.
Okay, so is an oven.
Principle. It has nothing to do with how long you leave it alone for.
Okay, so then is an oven a means of production?
It depends.
Well,
what is it being used for?
Making pizzas.
Well,
for people or for you individually?
Well,
I mean, is it being used to produce pizzas on a mass scale to be distributed, or is it just, I'm going to make a pizza for me and my friends?
Well, to start, it's being used for me and my friends.
That's not a means of production because it's not an input into the economy. It's being used for an individual case, producing a good for a few individuals, not an input into the economy.
All right, so then some of my friends, they go and they come over, they're going to have some pizza, we're going to have a party and so on, and it's great. Then, one of them says to me, hey, you know what? I'm going to be having a party at my place, and I was wondering if I could get some pizzas. So then I make some pizzas for him to take to his party. Is the oven now a means of production?
No, it's still being used for to produce goods for individual people. It's not being put on into the economy. It's not being put into the mode of distribution. It's
okay,
just,
so then if I then take he takes it off to his party, his friends are raving about the pizza. They're saying, hey, this is great pizza. I love this pizza, man. This is awesome. And so then they say, how do you get, where did you get this pizza? And they say, well, Joe over here, he had it. He makes these pizzas, and so they come over to me and they say, "Hey, can I get some pizzas?" And I say, "Well, yeah, but I don't want to just make them. And I mean, can I?" And so they offer me something in exchange for them. Is the oven now a means of production that is in the private property realm?
No.
Okay, so then if I print up flyers,
So we don't have to go through like 5 jillion examples.
right? But
Yeah.
it helps me break it down so that we can see exactly where it is.
I understand the purpose of making examples.
All right, well then
I'm
let's
going to
let's
give
go
you
through
an
it, if you don't
example
mind.
that I think
it's
will
a
answer
part
the
of-
question well.
If it's a part of the economy, it has to be collectively owned.
Well, it is part of the economy already. We've already passed.
I'm going to give you an example that'll make it clear, so we don't have to go through like 5 billion of them.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, so basically, an input into the economy is something that's being inputted into the broad system of distribution. So things that are going to be going on, into firms to be distributed to the public. If, for example, I make a pizza for myself, that's obviously not being distributed to firms to be distributed to the public and so on. It's not a part of the system of distribution. It's individual actions between individual people. But if I say, I'm going to make a few pizzas, and then, for instance, I'm going to sell them, to a firm, and then they're going to distribute them to the public. That is an economic input. So,
Okay, so
for means of production for something to be a means of production, they have to be used in that manner. They can't be just used to produce among individual people. They have to be a broad input into the economic system of distribution.
So in my example, then, if I make the pizzas and my friend Bob, he goes out and he has the party and people are interested in my pizzas, and then Bob comes to me and says, "Hey, you know what? I'd like to sell your pizzas." I make pizzas. Bob goes out and sells them to other people. Bob gives me a certain percentage of the profits, and he keeps a certain percentage of the profits. That's now my oven is now production.
Oven is a means of production, yes.
And so then, therefore, somebody else owns it, or everybody owns it.
No, well, I mean, under a socialist property scheme, yes.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, all right. That doesn't make sense to me, but oh well. I guess that's the difference between
we
us.
could explore that if you would like.
I don't see how it is that just because I happen to be able to provide pizzas to a large number of people in a voluntary exchange, I'm somehow oppressing others.
Well,
There's a false premise already. You're abstracting again from the economic mode of distribution and the input into that distribution. You're like the language you're using, and this is the problem that I see with a lot of ANCAP analysis, is it's very atomized and individual, and it doesn't take into account broad economic systems. I'm not talking about a voluntary exchange between two people just on a general. I'm talking about an exchange between two people that is being directly put into the economic system of distribution. So the system of basically the system of how we distribute resources among the public, right? So that's when it becomes publicly owned, because it's affecting the public. It's affecting the economic system of distribution, which the public is directly affected by. That's why it becomes commonly owned, because people are commonly affected by it, right?
Uh-huh.
You can't just say, so that's why, I don't, you need to have an analysis of economic systems, like broad economic modes of production and distribution, in order to understand these property schemes. We can't go through, examples of atomized individual instances and try to understand it. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. It has to be about a broad mode of production and distribution.
I see. So, I guess the question comes then to me is, if we can't analyze it in an individualistic basis, in a this is a case of this person does this, this is where it becomes private property and therefore is now collective owned.
I didn't say that.
All right.
I said
Well,
that
it becomes
you can't analyze relationships that are only part of individual instances. So, for instance, we're not going to, be able to analyze the socialist property scheme if we look at me giving a present to my boyfriend. That's not how it works. We're going to have to look at how, things are distributed in the society, so how the broad distribution of resources is in society, and how, and what is done with the means to produce that broad distribution of resources. So that's what we're talking about here. We're not saying that it can't be analyzed and the behaviors that go into it can't be analyzed, but we can't analyze it in individual relationships that don't have anything to do with the broad mode of economic production and distribution.
Right. Well, the thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build up to that so that we have,
But there's no reason.
If you don't analyze the basic steps that go into the overall thing, then you can make, audacious claims about anything.
That's what I'm pointing out. I'm pointing out the necessary steps. You see, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that in order to actually analyze the steps, we need to analyze specific relations between people, not just any, case of individual interaction.
Okay, so in the example that we had here,
to make it more clear,
Quite a lot.
not to interrupt, but to make it more clear, you're not going to be, what we're trying to do is we're trying to analyze specific social relations, are we not? Like a specific kind.
a specific type of social relation, and I guess specifically, Finn Shaggy comments in the group here in the chats. He's basically saying at this point your friend is the capitalist, and you are a part of a pizza making pre-industrial feudal type thing. Your friend is the oppressor in this example. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't remember the example, so I don't know if I can say I agree. But again, to illustrate this point, okay, so we're talking about a specific relationship between people, right?
Okay, and the relationship becomes
trying to analyze what would be considered commonly owned in a socialist society. We are trying to analyze a specific relationship between people.
No, I wouldn't say a specific relationship between people. I would say a specific relationship between.
Relationship.
Let me finish the statement. Let me finish the statement. What I'm trying to analyze is the relationship between who has decision-making authority over the use of matter.
Yeah.
Of the stuff that's out there.
In a specific case, right?
I'm sorry. What was that?
In a specific case, right?
We can talk about it as generalities. We can use the term widgets.
No,
we can whatever.
That's the point. We can't talk about it as a generality. We have to talk about whether it's being used as a means of production. So who controls the matter and what the matter is being used as, and what social relationships pertain to that matter.
Well, I think that we all didn't we basically agree at the onset that I can own and be the final decider about an oven in my home.
Okay.
I mean, again, it depends. This is the thing that I don't think you're getting. It depends on how the oven is being used and the social relations that pertain to that oven. That's
so no, I don't own.
Someone's on an island and they're using an oven, because it has nothing to do with the economic distribution and production, the broad system of the broad mode of economic distribution and production. We're talking about specific social relations here, so we can't just analyze any individual interaction between people that we want to think of. That's why we can't just analyze me giving my boyfriend a present as and try to make that a socialist property scheme or whatever. Not even capitalist property schemes apply to that. We have to talk about broad modes of economic distribution and production, specific social relations in which objects are used in a specific manner. So we have to take it down to that specific level instead of thinking about whatever individual instances we can take.
Okay. I guess the thing that I'm having difficulty with is that if I own something, my definition is that I have final decidership, final decision-making authority over it. I can choose to tear it apart. I can choose to exclude people access to it. I can choose however I want to use it. And as long as if somebody else has something that they own or that they are the final decider of, how it is used, is affected in that regard, then I am interfering with their rights as the final authority for that. So, for example, if I'm using my pizza oven and I'm making a pizza and the smoke is coming out of the smokestack and dirtying up the laundry of the neighbor next door, I've violated their right to make the final decision regarding their clothing.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that definition. I'm fine with it.
Okay, so when I decide to use my pizza oven in order to make pizzas and then offer them in exchange, in barter, with other people who are out there in the economy, and they agree to make that trade with me, nothing's gone wrong. And then if they, in turn, choose to barter those pizzas that I barter with them with other people, I still don't see any break here. But now we've gone into the situation where it's actually part of the economy, where I'm influencing the economy.
But I'm not talking about, the economy in general. I'm talking about, again, the broad mode of economic distribution and production.
Well, it is A, I'm producing pizzas, and B, it's being distributed.
Not broad. It's not broad. That's the problem. You're talking about, again...
Okay, not broad. Okay, so what constitutes broad?
So, to give you a context on that, how is the broad system of how we distribute things? So how are firms distributing things, and how are those getting out to the public? This is what I think should be talked about in this instance. And what factors of production are going into that distribution? How is that that distribution and the things that are being distributed made? How is that? So that's the specific instances. So again, we have to talk about the broad modes. We can't just talk about individual cases of goods sliding around between people.
Right. Okay. So the question then comes up: how large of a distribution network does it have to be in order to be considered what you're talking about?
It has to be the broad mode. It has to be.
What's broad though? I mean, what do you would say constitutes broad? I mean, does it have to reach
right now?
What's that?
That's what I was just going into.
Okay, please continue.
So the broad mode of production and distribution is the kind of the predominant way in which firms are producing things and then distributing to the public, be they other firms or individual people.
Okay, you're going to have to repeat that for me in different terminology or something, because that's just not something that I'm catching. Okay.
So, for instance, so you know what predominant means? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, it's at least 50. It's actually greater in percentage than any other.
Yes, right, exactly. So I'm talking about the greatest, the greatest percentages, the predominant mode of how companies make things, and the social relations pertaining to those companies making those things, and then distributing those things to the public, be they other companies or individual people. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so
that's what we have to talk about in the terms of what is a socialist property scheme. What is a property scheme?
Let me just ask a question here. All right, let's just say that we have a person who owns the means of production of shoes. Okay, they've got a shoe factory, Nike or Reebok. Mm-hmm. They've got this big old factory. They've got all these sewing machines, all these cutting machines, all this rubber stuff. All these big machines. And this guy's a capitalist. He owns this big building making shoes, and everyone else out there is communistic or whatever. They're doing their thing. Since he does not have anything to do with the broad being at least greater in percentage than any other methodology, he's fine, because the rest of the 99.9% of the means of production and the distribution of production is done in a different way.
I mean, yeah.
Your definition is not working there.
Why isn't it working?
So you're saying that that's legitimate because it's not broad.
No, you got hung up on the word broad. So what I'm trying to say is, let's eliminate the word broad, okay?
Okay. All right. So let's start over in just, step one. Is the means of production.
The problem with your example
Uh-huh.
is that it isn't. So if we're talking about the word broad, right? I don't want to eliminate the word broad actually. So let's talk about the word broad. Okay. Your example is part of the broad way that it gets gets done. Because what's happening is if you're talking about the case of a shoe factory, okay, it is part of what is like whatever kind of production that is going on. It's part of the broad mode because instead of it being individual exchanges between individual people, it's going out into the public distribution of resources. It's going out into the way, the mechanism for distributing, the societal mechanism distributing resources to people. That's why. So you got hung up on the word broad too much there.
Right. So it's considered to be too large of a distribution if it's exceeded past how many people?
Well, I mean, so if it's going into if it's going into the kind of, I don't know how to put this in other words but if you, I mean, there's not much other way I can put this. If it's going into the system for how resources get to the public and not just individual cases of...
Right, I'm having you break down where it goes from being the individual to the public, because we already discussed that...
Isn't that kind of obvious, though? I mean...
No, not at all. I've made a case where we were talking about a group of friends that happened to be a friend of my friend's friends, so that was fine. But then if we go to my friend's friend's friends, then maybe that's too far.
No. No. Okay, so that's still individual cases, right? It's individual cases of exchange because it's you and your group of friends exchanging things, right? It's not the whole system of how resources get to the public. It's not the system.
Right, but you're going to have to say what the limitations are of the public is, because the public can mean every single person on the planet.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so if my means of production and the distribution of those means does not reach every single person on the planet, it's not public, or is it still public? Let's say I'm reaching every person in America. It's still public then, right?
No. It's not public.
So I can have a capitalist...
Again,
I can have what capitalists call...
What you said is key there, because it has to reach the entirety of the population in order for it to be a broad system of economic distribution and production. It can't be individual cases and individual places.
So in the case of I've got my Reebok's got their shoe place, and they're selling shoes to, let's say, 100,000 people in the society are buying Reebok shoes. Okay, they own there's an individual who owns the factory, and he's employing wage laborers to make those shoes. Since he's only reaching 100,000 people, this is not considered to be reaching the public because it's not reaching everyone. So therefore, it is not capitalist. It's not illegitimate.
I mean, I didn't say it wasn't illegitimate. I'm not even talking about legitimate. This is not a discussion about legitimacy. It's a discussion about what the common ownership of the means of production constitutes.
Well, you wouldn't make a claim that the common ownership of the means of production for that factory would be supported then, because he's not.
No. this is a conversation about what the common ownership of the means of production and what the means of production are. It has nothing to do with claims of legitimacy. It has nothing to do with the property.
So I moved past legitimacy.
It has to do with what something is. So we can't be going on making ethical judgments right now. This is a conversation about what objectively quantifies something.
Okay, well, to me, a means of production is almost everything.
That's completely off. I don't agree with that at all.
Okay, well, I'll go through a list of things that I consider a means of production. My vocal cords are a means of production. They produce sound.
Oh, God, this is painful.
Oh,
That's
all right.
That is already wrong.
So
it's the means of production are non-human inputs.
Okay,
so they have
non-human
nothing to
inputs.
do with your body.
So like a tree is a means of production because it produces apples.
Potentially, yeah, sure.
Okay, so if I have a home and I plant a tree in my house, in my garden that's in the middle of my house, that's not my tree.
Can we just say that the means of production is just like industry? Like, that's what we mean.
Machines.
That's what we're like
machines
that are part of the means, like industry, that sort of thing. Factories.
Okay. Big factories, it can't be just like a simple oven.
No, it can't be like a simple oven. Unless it's like
it can, but again, like I was saying,
unless it's like a part of like some kind of smaller industry, like smaller business.
Like Patrick is saying, industry
or a cooperative.
Broad is exactly what qualifies the broad mode of production and distribution in society. I honestly don't know what's so hard to understand about that. It's the mechanism in which the entire society gets resources. That's all we're talking about.
Okay. I think what I'm talking about is trying to build from the premise of ownership of stuff and building towards where that leads logically.
The original
trying to put up. Wait, can I finish my statement, please? Okay. So I'm talking about it building from the ground up, from the precepts of that I own the fruits of my labor, and therefore I own the things that I create, including means of production. And then the results of this are how we voluntarily interact with each other and how we voluntarily trade. And this is where I come up with Anarcho-Capitalism. However, I believe that where you're coming from is that you're seeing a preconceived conclusion that you assume is the nature of that. And that your fears of what that result is going to be because you're extrapolating.
Can I ask you something? Why does this always come down to whenever I get into an argument with an anarcho-capitalist, right? And this is, this is just the general. This is not every anarcho-capitalist. I've had plenty of discussions with you that didn't boil down to this. But whenever I'm talking to them, and whenever it gets to a point in the conversation where we're kind of just, we're not, getting each other's things, we're not, we're not understanding each other, we're not understanding what we're saying, which is kind of the point we're now, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's always, oh, well, the ANCOM is just being an evil little socialist and doesn't want to realize that he's wrong.
No. I'm not saying you're evil. I'm saying that you have a very legitimate
the kind of caricature that you're painting. You're saying that because, you're not understanding me because we're kind of talking past each other at this point, and because, I don't agree with your conceptions of production or whatever, because of that, I'm afraid of where my, what the logical conclusions of what my ideology is going to be. I'm trying to obfuscate from the truth. I mean, this is Stefan Molyneux levels of conspiracy right now.
Okay, I'm not intending to do that. All right, what I'm trying to say is that if you accept the principles that I'm talking about, okay,
I think
then I believe that there's a logically consistent process that you go through, and you come to what ends up being a logical conclusion. Now, I've not seen that you've demonstrated to me where it is that if I've done the labor to produce something, and then or by proxy, produce something, through barter, for example, that this thing that I own, just because it's now become used in a fashion that has the product of its produce being shared by a very large number of people, has now somehow usurped my right to own it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how
But
it
then
is
say
you
that.
can make that
Say
claim.
that. Say, I don't understand your conclusion. I think
Okay.
it's logically inconsistent. Say that instead of, you're trying to obfuscate from the logical conclusion of your ideology.
I guess what's happening here is I'm running out of time, and I know, in fact, we're actually 15 minutes over, and I was trying to, pull up the schedule to make sure that whoever's coming next isn't freaking out.
I mean, that's
But
understandable. I'm just pointing out, if you're trying to convey what you're trying to convey, which is that you don't think my conclusions are logically consistent, just say that. Don't go with this accusatory stuff.
I agree, and I apologize if I made.
All right, that's fine.
I do think that a very large percentage of the time when I'm talking about these things, that the perspectives that I get from mancoms tend to be, or even Marxists, tend to be conclusion-based, and then working backwards to how to prevent these conclusions, which are obviously conclusions we want to prevent, and then trying to, fit the pieces of the puzzle together so that they avoid this negative outcome, instead of starting from first principles and then moving forward into something that's logically
consistent. Works.
Yeah.
The only way, the system of ethics, the only system of ethics that we can work towards is determining, okay, what is ethical, and then saying, okay, how do we prevent what is not ethical? That's how, that's how ethics works. You can't do this, there's no way, there's literally no way to do an ethical analysis without trying to get to conclusions that are good and trying to stay away from conclusions that are bad. That's the ethical process itself.
I disagree. I think that you can start with axiomatic principles, and you can.
But that's a principle, though. That's a principle. That's trying to stay away from things that are bad and trying to get to things that are good. That's what a principle is.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that if you start with axioms, you can use them to then, evaluate circumstances and situations, and then predict what the results will be.
Exactly the process that you're describing. You're describing, okay, so you think that Marxists and Ancoms tend to work in this way where they come to conclusions and they try to say, okay, what is the most consistent with my conclusions, and they try to prevent bad things, and they try to, promote good things. That's what, this axiomatic process that you're talking about is.
No, it's not.
Yes,
No.
it is. You're saying that we're starting from principles.
No, one is inductive. One is inductive, and the other one is deductive.
What?
One is inductive, and the other one is deductive.
Okay, so explain that to me. What is deductive and what is inductive about?
Right.
Where are we?
All right. So inductive would be if you're looking at the environment.
Inductive and deductive mean where does the deductive process start in whichever one it was, mine or yours, and then where does I guess yours is the inductive, but so where does the inductive apply in yours?
Actually, I think I'm using the wrong one. It might not be inductive. It's called something else, I think. Inductive.
Well, I think we're just sort of dealing with hypothetical never mind.
Yeah. All right. Deductive starts out with a general statement or hypothesis and examines the possibilities to reach a logical conclusion. Scientific method, basically, which I'm saying that anarcho-capitalism is using that. Inductive reasoning is you are making broad generalizations from specific observations, like we've seen that the devastation that capitalism has done, and then you use the understanding that, all right, we've got all these bad things that have happened, and we know that these bad things have happened under a capitalist system. Therefore, capitalism is bad.
Oh, the thing with Marxism is it's not really about morality. It's more about the internal contradictions of capitalism sort of destroying itself. We are just sort of going through the motions and ending up towards
a lot of times people do that. They make this claim about these things, but then the response when we ask them is how, and the responses that we always get are going to be things like, well, they pollute people's property, and then
Yeah, that causes
That's
people
not,
not to want.
that's not, they didn't arrive from, like, I know a lot of leftist theory, right?
Right.
I've spent, like, a long time, like, looking at it and reading it and all that. I can specifically tell you that the large majority of leftist theory, of leftist, I guess, academia, if you want to call it, it doesn't start from that conclusion. It's based on building, and this is actually a hugely important thing, and this is something that leftists argue about all the time, is that, okay, like, we're going to scientifically study what is going on, and then we're going to try to come to a proper conclusion about, like, the actual forces at work here. And this is how Marx and many other people got to the point of blaming capitalism for what it is. I'm not saying it was correct. I mean, I think it was correct for the most part, but but it's not even about that. They were getting to their principles on the principle of the scientific method, on scientific study. It wasn't just, all right, oh, we see some bad shit happening. I think we might. The news says we have capitalism, so therefore capitalism equals bad. It's not that, and I know ANCAPs think that, but it's not. It's nothing close to the reality.
Well, I've not heard anybody actually provide a step-by-step inductive method of explaining ANCOM theory. And the thing that really is weird is when I asked you to give an example of, let's say, all right, does somebody own the fruits of their labor, and then you say depends.
I don't usually say depends, and most ANCOMs don't say depends. They either say they don't or they do.
Okay, and so then if we say that they don't, all right, then we start to look into, then who does, and we go into, all right, claims of final authority in decision making are based upon a claim of popularity, a claim of divine authority, or a claim of self. And individual ability to have that type of a claim.
That's a dichotomy. That's a false dichotomy.
Well, I mean, you can add in other options. I'm just giving you some examples. Those aren't all inclusive.
But the one that you completely glossed over is based on merit, and that's where a lot of these people get their analysis from.
Okay, so based on merit is where.
For instance, there were a few anarchist communists who thought that the right to own your labor was oppressive, right? So they were using that, they were saying that, as a system of based on merit, who should own what. It wasn't about a divine authority or any of those other principles. It was about a system of merit. Okay,
and so where are the merits derived from?
I don't think that there are. I mean, are you asking me, does it have merit, or do you, what are they arguing that the merit is?
Well, first of all, is this the understanding that you espouse, or is it a different understanding?
No, it's a different understanding. There's typically two understandings. One was that, within anarchist communism. One was from Bookchin and Kropotkin, which, that's typically, and that's the main sources in anarchist thought, is that, yeah, people can own the fruits of their labor because they will naturally gravitate in an ANCOM society towards, working to the benefit of all. And then there was the conclusion by people like Nestor Makhno, which was that people should not have the right to the product of their labor because that entails the right to create structural violence, and thus it is oppressive. And then I have my view, which is neither.
Okay, so let's go ahead, go around the group here, and let's start. We've got an understanding from the one there, and so let's go. Jake has said his thing. Let's get an idea from Bob. What do you think as far as does a person own the fruits of their labor, assuming that no one else already has a claim of ownership over it?
I personally believe that people should have the rights to the fruits of their labor, such as expanding on your example, I make a pizza, I should have the right to eat that pizza. But
or
if I
throw
make
it away, or
whatever. Do whatever. But if I say I'm in a factory working to make other products for other people, then no, I do not. That is for everyone, not specifically me.
Okay, all right. So when we're talking about owning the fruits of one's labor, the
I think
produce
you
of
wanna-
my
I think
labor.
you might want to also ask Patrick.
Oh yes, sorry, Patrick, please.
Well, it depends on if it's beneficial for the community as a whole. Like,
So no, they don't.
so no, they don't necessarily have the right to. I don't really buy into rights as a concept as a whole.
I'm not saying the rights to. I'm saying, are they
Like,
legitimately
are they
accepted
socially
as the final
allowed?
authority?
Yeah, are they socially allowed to have the final authority over the fruit of their labor?
No,
Okay.
it's determined by the whole of society.
Okay. All right. So, and of course, I'm going to come from the perspective that if you made it and you're making it with resources that you claim from nothingness that nobody else had claims to, that you do own the fruits of your labor. All right. All right. So the question then comes up: if I don't own the fruits of my labor, who does?
The community as a whole.
Okay. So is that done in a proximity basis? Is that done in a this person is the head of our collective? Is this, how is it determined who is the final authority when it comes to deciding how something will be used?
Well, the party represents the working people, so they would decide how the labor is used.
I think, though, we're talking about like an end goal society. So like he's talking about like the ethical, like the final ethical principle that you would arrive at. So like within the context, you would be talking about a communist society, not the transitional period of socialism.
Oh, in the end, yeah. Well, the community it would probably be proximity based. Like with communism, you have sort of a it's pretty much at this point it's hypothetical right now because
Well, sure, it's hypothetical. Yeah, we're all dealing with hypothetical
situations, and so it's I think it would be proximity based overall. Proximity based, like if there's problems and more research goes into it, and we can't have it be proximity based, then we'll not go with the proximity based system.
Right. So, if it's proximity based, let's say that I move out into the middle of nowhere where nobody else is around me, and I go through and I make myself an orchard. I make a farm. I'm doing all these things with me and my family, and all my family is all gung ho. We're all happy with each other in our relationships, and then a bunch of other people move into the neighborhood. Now they get to say this orchard is partly ours.
Well, yeah, it would be beneficial for the community as a whole if it were that way. So
Okay. All right. And the response that you would have there, Jake, would be different, or it would.
Well, I mean, I think that people are entitled to the fruit of their labor, but I think that entails the equitable distribution of resources. So I don't think, like, I have a different view than a lot of people. I don't think that, for example, you can say that, oh, someone built a tree, so therefore that's the product of their labor. I don't think that. I think that the skills that one obtains and the tools that one obtains just in general to be able to even, did I say build a tree, by the way? That was stupid. Anyway, so to be able to make something, right? The tools that one obtains come from the broader society.
Right.
We were built on other people raising us up and other people providing us services. Without that, we would be unable to make anything. So
Right. The example that I gave, though, is kind of addresses that. I mean, we have a family that's living on their own. They've,
Well, like let me say
Okay.
my piece, and then
Okay,
I'll
please do.
determine like how that fits in. But so like basically, what I would say is that so any given thing is a product of societal labor. And thus, if we are to have people having the full right to the product of their labor, we have to have a societal say in the distribution of resources.
Okay, and so how does that affect the scenario that I was talking about, where you've got a
I
family?
didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. Could you repeat that for me? I'm sorry.
So how does that work within the constraints of the theoretical that I posed, where you've got a group of people? I don't know. Let's say that it's a tribe of people that live in Australia. This is before Australia has been found by any other population. Okay, and they're all a tribe. They're all doing their thing, and they're all happy. They're negotiating. They're doing their thing. They're making, they claim ownership over this particular plot of land. They've planted trees. They've created this orchard. They've created their farms. They've got livestock that they're managing, and so on. And your ship arrives. You've got, let's say, several ships, cruise ships worth of people. So we've got 200,000 people move in, and opposed to the, let's say, 500 people that have been living in this community, and they've got things doing their way, and then the 200,000 people plop on the shores, and they say, well, we also own this.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that is fair, or is that it's a legitimate claim that they can say, yeah, we understand that you planted all the orchard trees?
I think what I would say is I don't think that individual people can say, all right, we retain the rights to control over this no matter what. Because that, I think, violates the principle that people should have the right to the fruit of their labor. Because, again, like, what is produced with our labor is cultivated by the whole of society, and thus is a reflection of society's labor, and not one individual person's labor.
I think deny that the 200,000 people that showed up.
Right. So I'm going to talk about that.
Anything to do with it.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to talk about that.
Okay.
Right now. So I think it'd be wrong in both instances for the family that physically put it together to say, all right, we have the complete rights of control over it. And I think it would be also wrong for the cruise ships to come about and the people on them say, all right, well, we get full control over this. I
That's
think
not full control.
Part of control or whatever. I think it would be wrong on both sides because you're not, there's not a societal say in the distribution of resources anymore.
Well, sure it is. You've got 200,000 people saying we want.
No, it isn't. You're talking about individual examples of individual people. Okay, so if you maybe stated that it was the whole of society, then yeah, I'd agree. But
right, there's 200,500 people.
Is that the whole of society in this theoretical
world? The whole
world?
of society, and 200,000 of them came here on cruise ships, and 500 of them have been living there and been working the land and doing their thing. Mm-hmm. And the people who are the 500 say, well, this is the stuff that we've cultivated. We've put in all the effort. It's all of our work. These are this is our lifeblood that we put into this land and in producing it. There's all that other land that's out there that nobody has done anything with. You're welcome to it. Go for it. But this is our farm. This is our ranch. This is our homestead. You guys go over there and do your thing. Have at it. But this is ours. And then as a society, they get together. The 200,500 people get together and they say, all right, well, we're going to do a direct democracy vote, and we're going to say, who gets to make final decision authority over this? And the 200,000 lockstep votes Joe. He gets to decide how things work.
That's no, I don't agree with that. First of all, I mean, if we're going to do a voting system, I don't think voting systems are necessarily legitimate. I think that the kind of democracy that should be strived for should be a consensus democracy, where decisions are not made unless without the full consent of everybody involved. So if debate is a voting,
consent no matter what.
What?
The 500 refuse to consent to any sharing whatsoever.
So are you presenting that as a problem with consensus democracy or what?
Right, yeah. Let's say that they have 500
That's
refuse to consent to anything whatsoever. That they say
that's
this is our
not
line.
that's not viable within the ethical principle. So right, if it has to be based on the full consent of everyone involved, a few people can't just refuse the society into stagnation and say nothing and make nothing get done, because
Well,
obviously that violates.
there's not stagnation
Well,
necessarily. I mean, they've got all this other land that they can go off and do stuff with.
but like if you're talking about, all right, so let's not talk about the stagnation of society then. Let's talk about just that group of people, right?
You're saying the stagnation.
If we are making it so that nothing gets done and we're vetoing every decision, then obviously we are not going about the principle of consensus-based decision making, because we are forcing everybody else in the group to deal with nothing to get done.
Wait.
In reality, consensus democracy would have to be a system where we make everyone the happiest possible.
Wait, when was the show supposed to end?
36 minutes ago.
We're past that ship now; it has sailed.
Yeah. So I figured we might as well just keep on going. All right. I've always wanted to have a longer show anyway, so I'm just better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Anyway, the question is then, all right. At the point that you're saying, well, you guys are not, you're putting a blockade on the negotiation here. This is not something that is acceptable to put a blockade on the negotiation. All right. This is illegitimate. You cannot make a blockade on the negotiation. All right. They could just as easily say, but you're putting a blockade on the negotiation. You're refusing to allow our perspective to move forward, and we have a variety of other things that we can do within our constraints. This is just one of those particular points that we're like to set forward. And there are all sorts of other considerations that we would like to put forth, like that we will offer like-for-like exchanges that we consider acceptable.
Okay. So are you saying that it's just as much of a claim that they could have, which they're saying, okay, well, you're not letting us, kind of, just like veto every decision, and thus it's not consensus?
Right. You're saying that we're blockading the discussion, that we are exhibiting bad faith when it comes to our negotiations. And their claim is, well, you're exhibiting bad faith in our negotiations because you won't give on the point that this is ours to decide what goes, how it's used. We're willing to negotiate with you in how it is that the proceeds are traded and bartered.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, my response to that is, again, if we're going by a principle of, well, we're going to say, no, you can't do this, and we're going to say, no, you can't do that, without a kind of metric for what's going to meet everybody's desires the best possible, we're not operating under consensus democracy. We're operating on randomly imposing each other's will on each other. That's not consensus democracy. Again, a consensus democracy.
So how does consensus democracy work there?
Consensus democracy, in actuality, would have to be working it out so that it's the best possible situation for everyone involved. That's how you reach the best possible consensus possible. It's not, vetoing every decision so that nothing gets done. It's not blockading people from doing this. It's trying to make the situation the best possible for everyone involved.
Right, and they have their solutions that they propose, and you have the 200,000 have their solutions that they propose, and neither party is willing to go with the other party. They've said, all right, well, what we want is we want communal ownership of the means production, the orchard, the windmills, the water mill. This is legitimate to us, and they say, well, no, that's not legitimate to us. The best way for us to understand how to have a productive and beneficial society is for us to manage it because we know how it works. We've done it best before. We have experience using it. We were the ones that actually made it. We know all the ins and outs about it, and so we want to be able to own it and manage it.
There's a false premise there, though.
Okay.
If we're talking about a consensus democracy, right, then we can't have the means of production monopolized for a few people. We have to have the common ownership of them, because otherwise we don't have a consensus democracy. The means of production equally affect everyone. So, you can't say, all right, we're going to monopolize the things that affect everyone for ourselves. That obviously violates principles of consensus. So that would not even be a debate if we're going to have a consensus democracy.
Okay, so then if you say that, then the 500 guys, they say, all right, you know what? We won't have it affect you guys at all. We won't interact with you at all. You're not involved.
I mean, I don't know what this is supposed to accomplish, though. I mean, are you saying that...
The claim is, what I'm saying is that the principles that you're saying is, as far as who makes the final decision regarding these two opposing viewpoints, is bottom line going to come from one of the people, at least one, maybe it's a committee, whatever, of this 200,000 people.
No.
And is essentially going to end up being majority or popularity wins.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I said that the best decision for everyone involved has to be come to. That means everyone has to have an equal say. You can't just say, oh, well, the majority is going to monopolize it. I mean, that's obviously in violation with trying to make everything the best as possible for everyone.
Okay, if everyone has an equal say, how is it the majority does not win?
I don't see how the majority could win if everyone has an equal say. That's kind of a self-detonating statement.
All right. It seems kind of obvious to me that if you have, let's say, 10 people voting on where to go to dinner, if 7 of them say we want to go to P.F. Chang's, we're going to P.F. Chang's. Now, if you're saying that everyone has 100% veto power, okay.
But that's going beyond the realm of either of those. I'm saying that the best solution has to be worked out for everyone.
Okay.
That's what a consensus
and
democracy.
when you come to a disagreement about how the
Right, so if you come to a disagreement about what things to be done, you need to work that out. You can't just leave it unsolved, have everybody veto it, and then nothing gets done. Or you can't just say the majority gets to have the rule of the decision making. You have to work it out. You have to actually have human interaction instead of just
this is something you can't
dominate the other person and force them to go along with what I'm going to do.
Right, but the bottom line is you're going to have to answer it with one. This is not a false dichotomy. I believe it's actually a legitimate dichotomy. Either A, you have the people who have made the stuff and are unwilling to budge on their claim of ownership, their claim of final decision-making power. They have the right to veto your options that are presented, or they don't.
I don't think I think again it goes beyond that realm. You're staying within this realm of okay, we're going to impose our decisions on other people. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that people could just veto everything into stagnation. I'm not saying that the majority can get the rule. I'm saying that it has to be worked out so that everyone has the most, good brought to them possible. I don't know I don't know why that's such a hard concept.
Let's start with some very basic principles. Okay, you and I have our own modes of deciding things. You're an individual, you have decision-making ability, I have decision-making ability within me. All right?
Right.
You and I will disagree.
Yeah.
This is an axiomatic claim. Do you accept this axiomatic claim that we will disagree?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, at the point at which we have a disagreement, one of those positions as to how something will be handled will take precedence. Correct?
Yeah.
All right. The method by which one determines which of those two claims takes precedence is the determination of who is the final deciding agent.
Well, but the thing is, it's not. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I might have unknowingly agreed to that, but it doesn't have to
Okay,
be.
so back it up. Back it up. Let's
Right,
start
yeah.
at the
So I'm
All
not. Like, it's not going to be like it's not a dichotomy between two decisions. Right.
All right.
It's
So
it's
you're
trying
able to make decisions.
meeting
I'm
in the
able to
middle.
make
If we
decisions.
have a disagreement, is to
Right.
meeting in the middle among with all of the possible roads we could go down to make everyone the happiest possible. That's
All
what
right,
I'm
so
saying.
the golden mean type of decision making is what you're saying.
I don't know what that word means.
The happy middle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that you guys hate this freaking argument, but it's just the one that's the most, obtuse and obnoxious that I can create, so as to create, to force us to acknowledge that this type of golden mean is bullshit.
Okay.
All right?
It's not going to be the human nature argument, is it?
No, it's
Okay.
going to be the rape example.
Oh god, no, no, no.
I don't even know this one, so.
It's
Well, I want to have sex. She doesn't want to have sex. The happy medium is she gives me a blowjob.
no,
Oh my God, no.
no.
Okay, obviously that's ludicrous, right? It's idiotic. There's no way that we would say that a happy medium is legitimate there. One person has a legitimate claim of saying no, right? Veto power there exists, right?
However,
but that bypasses the problem with that. As I think about it, right? So I thought about it. It sounds like a good objection if you don't take into consideration that bypasses the whole structure. You're saying that one decision has to become like that in that case the decision has to be made. That's not what it is. The structure is that people have to be the happiest possible. How the hell are people going to be the happiest possible if you make people give other people blowjobs against their will? That makes literally no sense. It bypasses the whole structure of decision making that I presented.
Well, theoretically, if we've got 7 guys and 1 chick,
They're not the happiest possible, though. The happiest possible.
well, the 7 guys are completely unhappy if they don't.
Right, the happiest possible would be not having the chick get raped and then finding, something else for the guys to do. Like that's the happiest possible. It's not the happiest possible if you rape the chick. Like that's obvious.
Obviously it's bad. But the thing that comes up though is she has the right to not negotiate on that particular point.
Mm. Yes,
Okay.
I'm not saying again. I'm not.
Okay, but the claim is
hung up on a few.
let him finish.
all right. The claim is that the people who have actually put in the blood, sweat, and tears, the years of their lives to build all the things that they've built, to make everything that they've produced, have the legitimate right of saying, you know what, you're not going to violate something that is essentially my life the produce of my life, whether it's physically attached to my body or not. It is mine because it was my life. My life is there. That is an example of my life.
That's exactly what I'm saying, though. Like literally, that's what I'm saying.
200,000 people have no
You can't
claim
make
on it.
decisions. You can't. I mean, you're getting like the reason I said that there was no veto power is because again, there has to be a compromise, right? To make everyone like the happiest
The compromise
possible.
thing doesn't work, right?
Like the happy middle, right? Right? So we're saying that. How is it a happy middle to rape someone? Like, I don't understand the logic here at all. It
No, it's a
bypasses the whole
compromise.
thing.
It's
Okay?
a compromise.
It's a
It's a
compromise,
compromise,
but it's not a happy middle compromise. Like obviously, if we're trying to make people the happiest possible, a compromise like, all right, we're gonna stab you to fucking death because we want to stab you to death, and that's obviously not like, and so okay, so like to try to build off of your example, so all right, so we want to stab you to death, right? Okay, and you say I don't want to be stabbed to death. And then you say, well, a happy middle would be, having them shot to death. I mean, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That makes like literally no sense. That wouldn't be a happy middle because the one person is getting killed.
Okay, so if the case of the, let's expand upon that. I think that we're kind of potentially heading in the right direction here. Let's say that we've got a group of people who are chemotherapy victim. They're going through chemotherapy. They have no hair, and there is a person who has 6 feet of hair. Okay, and they say, well, we want to shave off your head and use the hair to cut, to give hair to these poor children because, they're certainly, they need hair. And the person says, no, that's you're not taking my hair. And they say, well, all right, then we'll just cut off 2 feet. Is this legitimate now?
That's not a happy compromise. The person does not want to have their hair cut off.
That depends.
Say, oh, well, take hair from horses then.
What did you say? What did you say?
Well, I was saying, if that person doesn't want his hair cut off, then they will simply compromise by saying, we'll cut some hair off the horses and use that for wigs.
Okay, so then let's go to the example of the island thing, or the where the 500 people are and the 200,000 people, and they say, you know what, we're doing the same thing. We're saying instead of you cutting off our hair, our property, and you've got all that other property over there, have at it.
I mean, I think the thing that you're missing here is if we're talking about a happy compromise, there has to be a degree of mutuality, right? So everyone has to be okay with it. Right? Everyone has to, the most good has to be brought possible, right? There has to be mutuality, right?
But that's not, isn't that veto power then?
I mean, in some cases, yes. In some cases, it won't be.
Right.
I mean,
so
we're talking about everyone has complete veto.
That other people don't have the right to veto.
But let me explain this. We're talking about everyone has complete veto power. Then everyone has the authority to veto any decision ever, and that's obviously not. Taking into account, trying to make everyone the happiest possible. That's basically giving the rights of a few people to say, all right, nothing's going to get done. So that's not legitimate within the structure. It's also not legitimate within the structure to say, all right, we're going to, force you to do this. Like your idea of a happy middle seems to be, all right, so you don't want to do X bad thing, we're just going to make you do a less bad thing. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If we're talking about a happy middle, there has to be mutuality where everyone is satisfied with the decision.
But you're doing the same thing with the people who have the 500 people
who
have
not.
their
How is everybody going to be happy?
We want 100% control over our property, and then they're saying, no, you know what, you're going to have to give up some percentage of control over your property.
But is there mutuality in that relationship, though?
They are forcing them to give up part of the ownership.
This is the problem with your example. This is the problem with your example. This is a huge gaping hole in your example, right? You're using you're misrepresenting a compromise with we're gonna make you do a slightly less shitty thing. Like, that's not a compromise. That's making the situation slightly less shitty. A compromise has to have mutuality, again, where everyone is happy with the decision.
So their response is, this is something that is ours, we will not compromise on it. Her response to the people who want to have sex is, I will not compromise, I will not have any sexual interaction with you. Their response is, oh, but that's not compromise, that is vetoing, we don't accept that, and they move forward with a less obtuse version of what it is that they were planning on doing in the first place.
Yeah, so if people are in need of sexual gratification, right, then you have to find an avenue where they can get that sexual gratification without raping her.
Right, okay, so there's an alternative that's presented.
That's what I'm saying! I'm saying that there's an alternative. I'm saying that it can't be obtuse structure of an obtuse structure of decision-making. I'm saying that people have to be flexible. That's what a compromise is. It's not making somebody do something slightly less shitty.
Right, but so the flexibility in the case of the woman is to say, you know what, guys? There's lots of women out in the sea. Go find one and convince them to have sex with you. Okay? And the response from the people who own the 500 people is, there's plenty of land out there, plenty of rivers for you guys to make your own mills. Go at it.
Okay. I mean, that's fine.
One, I just want to point out the sexism of this. You're treating women as property.
No, I'm not treating women as property. I am creating a situation that is obviously blatantly offensive so that we can see the crystal clear point at which it is not viable for someone to not have veto power or for us to expect some sort of meeting in the middle between two different opposing viewpoints. Okay? There are times when people can make a claim and say, I'm not budging. And that is a legitimate claim, and they are fully...
Never said that it wasn't, though.
Right,
No
but I'm clarifying to him that it's not putting women as property. It's putting women as the final decider over their selves, their lives.
Okay.
Okay,
So
I'm not making any claim about women being property at all.
All right, so Patrick, do you think that's a legitimate claim, or do you have a response?
Well, can you say the claim again? I'm sorry, I'm just...
He said
woman-
that he's not treating women as property because he's creating a situation in which they would be property and saying that's obviously bad, so we should make conclusions based on not making women property.
Yeah, we shouldn't make conclusions based on making women property.
Right, and that's what he's claiming.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what his original argument is, so he's saying that it's not, sexist or making women property.
Right.
Well,
I'm saying that the woman has final decision-making authority over herself.
Yeah.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, I don't have a I don't have a problem. I'm sorry, I don't have a problem. I just
Okay. So the woman has final decision-making authority over herself.
yes.
500 people are claiming to have final decision-making authority over the land that they have. Then the other people are coming along and offering or suggesting a new method or a new plan of action. The woman says, no, as final authority on this particular decision, I'm going to say no. And in the case of the people who claim ownership of this land, they say, all right, we're going to express our position as being no. We're finally vetoing the offer. And then the question is, well, then how do you negotiate? How do you come to compromise? And in her case, she says that there's plenty of people out there in the sea. Go out there and find yourself a woman and persuade them. Maybe you might end up choosing to be gay, whatever it happens to be. Maybe you don't even have a choice to be gay. I don't care. The point is there's alternatives for you out there. And in the case of the people, the 200,000 who have landed on the shores of this location, there's lots and lots of property out there for them to go ahead and cultivate and turn into farms, into orchards, turn into mills, and so on. And for them to say, the compromise is, have at it. Go out there. Make your own. Seems to me that these are two similar positions. One is saying...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The distribution process of things has to be done in such a way that everyone is happy. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, then, but the people who are coming in on the 200, the 200,000 people are coming in and they're saying, well, we're not happy. We're going to have to work without food or water.
You're going to have to find a fucking, you're going to have to work that out. You're going to have to have human interaction and be human instead of just vetoing people's decisions.
Okay. And so then they say, all right, well, we're going to have to work without having any food or water because there's nothing already gathered for us, and we might starve to death, we might not have enough water, and then the 500 say, you know what, we can help you with that, and we can offer to trade you in advance. We're going to go ahead and give you all the food that you guys need in order to make sure you guys don't starve. We're going to give you all the water that you need in order to make sure you don't die of thirst. But when you get enough of that stuff harvested on your own, you give it back to us. Plus, because we're going to have to go hungry for a while, a little bit extra.
Okay.
All right.
Would that be acceptable?
I didn't hear the example, so that's going to have to be up to Patrick. I don't even think he believes in consensus democracy. I don't even know.
I don't buy into consensus democracy. I gotta go.
I mean, I think Bob does.
I gotta go.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Patrick. See you later.
Bye, Patrick. I'll see you on the debate groups.
All right. So I will. I'll repeat the question. They're arriving. They don't have food. They don't have water.
Yeah.
All right. They know that they're going to starve to death or die of thirst if they have to go out there and work the land and start from scratch, right?
Yeah.
The people who live there, they've saved up seed grain, and they've saved up a fair amount of excess water, purified water. And they've done this to prepare for emergencies. Okay? They say, you know what? We will help you. We will make sure that you guys have enough food and water to get yourselves going. We've got a couple of weeks that of stuff that we can help you guys out with. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and work overtime in our land in order to increase production so that we can help you guys even more.
Yeah.
Now, in exchange, though, when you guys get up and running, we're going to want to have those stores back, because we do need to have the seed grain in order to be able to set up our harvest for the next year. We're going to need that back, and then because we would have been able to do all this other cool stuff that we've been planning, and we can't now. What we expect is that after you guys have set up your stuff, some of you guys are going to come over here and do the work that we would have done in the same time.
Yeah.
Is that a negotiation, or is that?
I think that's fine. I mean, if that's what everybody's cool with, I don't see a problem.
Okay. And so then they kind of go back and forth as far as all right, well, these are the terms and conditions of what it is that we negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay. To me, this is anarcho-capitalism.
That's not anarcho-capitalism at all.
It's not.
No. I mean, so if you're starting from if we're talking about, in this example, right, people are structuring the relationship the way they want it to, right? That means that they have to have the right to determine the conditions of the relationship just as much as the next person, correct?
Well, I suppose that there's a lot of different circumstances that go into it. There's details that we would.
So if we're going to say that people should have the right to, kind of decide what their relationships are going to be, we have to have a situation worked out where it's based on consent, and so you can't, force your will on anybody in the relationship. And the problem to me comes.
Well, let me respond by that to that. What I would say is
but I'm not finished. So let me just go on.
All right.
You can say what you want to say about it. But anyway, so the problem to me with anarcho-capitalism and that comes into conflict, because anarcho-capitalists, number one, are voluntarists, so they see any relationship entered into voluntarily, while they might not, like the conditions of the relationship that the other person does or whatever, they see it as permissible. So any relationship that's entered into voluntarily is permissible, and that means that the relationship doesn't have to be the inside conditions of the relationship and the structure of the relationship overall doesn't have to be determined by both parties. It doesn't have to. It just has to be the case that both parties enter into it voluntarily. Within the relationship, it's perfectly fine for one party to monopolize decision-making power and not, and exclude the other person from decision-making power in the relationship. So that's number one where I see the conflict. Number two where I see the conflict is that ANCAPs advocate markets, and markets are not based on consent. Markets are based on people being submitted to predetermined property relations to have access to resources. And number two, private property violates that principle as well, because once you have private property, you have one person who monopolizes. So, private property is a kind of relation within the means of production where one person monopolizes, or, a few people, whatever, instead of like the whole of society, a few people or one person monopolizes control of production, and thus excludes the rest of the population from production. And even though the rest of the population is affected by the production. So it clearly violates their consent within the relationship and their decision and their right to decision-making power within the relationship. So if you're saying that ANCAP is where people get to mutually decide their, the conditions of their relationship, there's obvious conflicts in,
but the thing
ideology, obvious contradictory currents within ANCAP ideology.
Okay.
That
Well,
lead us to reject that conclusion if we are to take ANCAP to its logical conclusion.
Well,
all right.
I need to go.
All right.
Let's see you, Bob.
Thanks for joining, Bob.
Good talking to you.
The thing that I would say to you is that we've gone about an hour over. I think that's I'm gonna have to cut it there. But
yeah.
I think that when it comes to the understandings that we have here, when you realize that there is plenty of opportunity for the 200,000 to go ahead and pursue themselves production.
Mhm.
And there is no monopolization of the means of production because there's plenty of means of production that's out there to be had. It just all it takes is the effort, the labor to put it into practice. You have an understanding that is acceptable to you, and what I'm going to claim is that in the anarcho-capitalist perspective, in the understanding of what we have, is that we have an abundance of the means of production, assuming that we don't accept claims of dibs, where somebody can just go, all right, I'm going to stick up some stakes around this land, put up a fence, and that's mine. Nobody else can use it. That's claiming dibs. It's not doing it. That's not a legitimate claim of ownership. Okay. So then the idea that you're going to have this wealth disparity that's going to create additional problems, and you're going to have all these other power structure, where a employee does not have the power to basically go, I've got other options that I can go with at the snap of fingers. Okay. Whereas the employer does have the ability to do that. I've got 50,000 other employees that I could replace you with, so why do I have to negotiate in good faith?
All right.
These power structures create this what you might call structural violence. All right. That in the anarcho-capitalist society, that the number of extremely large employers would be very low, where you would have basically what you get to where you have an economy of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Based upon a factory size, the number of employees that are now work that, let's say, 3 shifts.
Are you talking about like the neoclassical principle of market equilibrium? Market forces will balance things out to, an equitable kind of landscape where there's not instability of the economy, and where there's the most equitable distribution of wealth as possible.
No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the gross disparities of wealth end up being almost non-existent.
Okay.
In fact, I would say non-existent. Gross disparities of wealth.
Okay.
There obviously will be wealth disparities because you'll have people who are willing to work harder and work longer and go into fields that are more tasking, more demanding. I fully expect that a person who is willing to go into the effort and labor that it takes to fully understand how to, create gene therapy to help people who are, going to be debilitated for an entire lifetime, there, is a certain demand for that. And it may be high demand, and it's worth quite a lot because of the effectiveness and the productivity that it actually provides, and the amount of technical expertise that it takes to go into it. This person is probably going to make a significantly larger amount of money over the course of their lifetime, and the person who is basically content with their life playing video games and then going off and working at a call center and then coming home and making YouTube hangouts with people to talk about things, he's probably going to be poor. Okay, I don't mind being poor in that environment.
Okay.
I don't mind that because I think that I get a better result by having somebody who is a very skilled, person being rewarded for having done the diligence that they put forth. I think that's a good thing.
Well, so are we ending the show, or am I going to respond?
Sure. If you can make it real brief, maybe ask a question that we can answer at another point in time. That's fine.
The thing is, it's not going to be a brief response. I mean, I have a lot of things to say about that.
Okay.
The thing I want to point out, though, I think that is most important, of principal importance, is that if we say, all right, well, this person, they don't have to accept, working for this boss. They can just go somewhere else and take advantage of the many other work opportunities that,
Which includes starting their own business, which includes...
Yeah, right, whatever you want to talk about. Okay. Right, all right, so if we're going to say that, how is that different? And I think every ANCAP out there who likes this argument, please think about this. How is that different from saying, I mean, you don't like America, you don't
can
like
always
the
leave.
state of America, you can just, go off somewhere else and take advantage of the many other countries that are out there.
Right, and the response that I had there was, I interrupted you specifically for that point, which was, or they can make their own business.
People can make their own nations. I mean, theoretically, at least.
No, they
I
can't.
don't think. I mean, I think people just going off and making their own business is about as likely as that. But yeah, I mean, people.
It happens all the time. Even now, with the oppressive government that we have, where they require you to pay a $100,000 taxi license in order to be a taxi driver in the city of New York, in New York City. The number of people who are making a substantial amount of money driving.
I mean, I understand that.
Uber.
I understand that business creation happens. But I think expecting everybody in society to do that in a capitalist society will be unrealistic. But that's a different point, right? We'll get into that at a later date.
Okay.
What I want to say to you is I don't think that's like the two claims are different. I can just as easy. I mean, like I can also, so say, well, the difference is that you can start your own business. People go out and claim land for themselves and start their own like little societies all the time. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, even within the NCAP community, Jeff Berwick, he started, he had this like thing going in Argentina where,
under Argentinian law, which was they required certain payoffs to officials in Argentina, I'm sure. There was a requirement of depositing a certain amount of money into bank accounts in order to be able to do that.
All right, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's, I assume
it's not a free environment.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So that's a bad example. Yeah. But there are people who go out and they go out into different parts of the world and make their little settlements in the woods somewhere. I mean, like, so it's not that much of a different claim. It's basically the same thing as like, all right, you don't like America, get the fuck out. Because yeah, people can start up their own little societies theoretically. I mean, there's nothing physically. Nothing physically preventing them.
I think we're making a fake claim if we were to say, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to seize control of Socorro, New Mexico, by buying out everyone who owns the property there, and then we're going to basically no longer pay federal taxes. And we're not going to pay state taxes to the state of New Mexico. And we're going to have this community be 100% all of our own.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, but you're not doing that within the proper context. I mean, there are actual territories that you can go to where governments don't have jurisdiction.
Socorro, New Mexico is one of them.
Really? I didn't know that. All right.
Right. The Louisiana Purchase was this, and then there was this claim, and blah blah. Socorro, New Mexico is kind of in it. It has a question of legitimacy when it comes to the buying of property.
Well, anyone can just go there and be like, yeah, autonomous society or whatever.
No, the claim is no, you can't, and then but then if you look at the documentation, the paperwork, yes, there's question as to whether it was actually when the lines were drawn up, this side the line went this way, this side the line went that way, and there was actually never a claim of ownership by the United States government of that particular city. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but in any case, we're going to have to call it quits. But I do appreciate you coming on there, Jake. You're always a wonderful guest to have on, and I do apologize again for the insinuation that you guys are thinking backwards, kind of thing.
No, that's fine. I understand.
This happens from time to time. We make these types of claims.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for having me. Definitely, I always like coming on here and talking about this. So.
Well, take care, and thanks for joining us. You guys have a great day.
Bye.